This video spoils the main twists of Professor Layton and the Curious Village, as part of its main premise. Hello there! Today I'd like to talk a bit about Professor Layton and the Curious Village. This game takes place in the town of Saint Mystère, located somewhere in the British countryside. The focus of this video will be on the town and specifically its inhabitants, who are puzzle-loving oddballs. They are also not as they first seem. Spoiler alert! The people in this town are almost all artificial, robots made by human hands. In this video, I want to give an overview of how and why these robots were made in the storyline of Layton's first game. And, as an aside, also try to figure out which characters in the game we explicitly know are robots for one reason or another. So, let us get started. To understand how Saint Mystère came to be, it is necessary to know the Reinholds, an aristocratic family of barons. They lived in the Reinhold manor, which would later be surrounded by Saint Mystère. The known members of the family were Baron Augustus Reinhold and his wife Violet. The family also had a servant in the form of Bruno, who was a friend of Baron Augustus. He was also a skilled technician who was able to create robots that were indistinguishable from humans. They were built partially with wooden cogs, and they could not grow. Their inner lives were malleable, as their personalities could be changed and their memories could be wiped, but it was believed they possessed something akin to a human heart. Each robot also possessed a serial number. The first robot Bruno constructed was Matthew, who was intended to serve as a butler to the Reinholds. At one point, Baron Reinhold and his wife had a daughter, Flora, and it is at this time that Bruno presumably built his second robot, the old lady Ingrid, who was to act as a nanny for the infant Flora. However, during Flora's early childhood, Lady Violet fell ill with influenza and passed away, leaving the Baron heartbroken. In an attempt to cheer him up, Bruno worked hard to create a robotic duplicate of Violet. It had the opposite effect, however, as the Baron found that he had only one possible love, that being Violet. Disturbed by the robotic duplicate, he wiped its memory and altered its personality to be bossy and short-tempered, thus resulting in the creation of Lady Dahlia, who was said to be the Baron's second wife. Despite this, remnants of Violet's memories remained within Dahlia, and she would sometimes dream of this other life as a result. At some point, Baron Reinhold heard from his physician that he had little time left on the world after falling ill, so he devised a plan to make sure Flora would not be alone after his death. He ordered the construction of the town of Saint Mystère, west of his manor, and had Bruno create robotic inhabitants for the town to fill it with life. These robots were each given varying personalities and also backstories, as some are said to be family of each other, like Crouton and Crum, Archibald and Lucy, and Agnes and Andrea. New members of the Reinhold family were also created to live in the manor, including Augustus's supposed brother Gordon Reinhold and his nephew, the son of an unseen third brother, Simon Reinhold. The robots were also built to be obsessed with puzzles, to test the intelligence of those visiting the town. Saint Mystère was namely devised to be a test of character for those seeking to obtain the Baron's greatest treasures, his daughter Flora and his fortune, after his death would be made public. This all to ensure Flora would be with an intelligent person after his passing. Bruno in time became the caretaker of the village, as the robots were not invincible and needed repairs lest they break down. As such, Bruno kept keys for each villager in his workshop, located in the basement of Saint Mystère's ominous tower, and brought the villagers there at night, whenever they start to feel ill. After finishing his work, he would wipe and alter the memory of the repaired villagers to make it seem as if nothing had happened, and release them back into the village. The intention was also that if the Reinhold fortune was ever found and removed from the village, the robots were to shut down, their purpose being fulfilled. With all of this in mind, it becomes clear that all of the inhabitants of the village encountered during Curious Village are in actuality robots. However, for which characters in the game is it actually explicitly confirmed that they are in fact a robot? I want to examine this question in a bit more detail. We will look at the list of characters included in-game under the bonus section as profiles. From this list, you can already dismiss a few characters right off the bat, as not being robots due to them coming from outside the village and reappearing in later games. Professor Layton himself, his apprentice Luke, Don Paolo, and his disguise of Inspector Chelmy, as well as the explorer Pavel, who likely found his way into Saint Mystere via the underground sewers. Aside from this, there are also characters from Saint Mystere who are confirmed to be human. Bruno, who created all of the robots, Augustus Reinholds, who commissioned the creation of the robots, and his daughter Flora, for whom many of the robots were built, and who is shown to grow from a baby to a young woman. Lady Violet is not among the list, but she is confirmed in the story to not be a robot as well, given how she was replaced by one later. The Layton Mobile is also included in the list, and it is of course not a robot given that it is a vehicle and not a person. Then there are the characters of whom we learn in the main story that they are robots. Matthew, Ingrid and Lady Dahlia were already mentioned previously, but in addition to this there are also Simon and Ramon. These characters break down or are on the verge of breaking down in the story, so Bruno sets out to capture and repair Ramon during the story and Simon after the game is over. In the story, there's also art where Bruno is shown repairing Pauli, a particularly quick to anger villager, showing us he is a robot as well. Beyond this, we have to turn to the descriptions of the characters in their profiles, a particular detail given towards the end of the game for more confirmation. Beatrice, Giuseppe and Zappone are mentioned to be robots in their profiles, in addition to a few other characters that were already discussed. Lastly, the detail near the end of the game mentioned previously, that gives us a few more confirmations, is a board shown when Layton and Luke first enter Bruno's workshop. This board contains images of the villagers, as well as keys Bruno presumably uses to deactivate them for repairs. Aside from villagers that are confirmed elsewhere as robots, a few more can be seen here. Gordon, Franco, Deke, Prosciutto and Archibald. From Archibald's inclusion on the board, it can be surmised that Lucy is a robot as well, given that she is said to be his granddaughter in her profile. This leaves the following characters as presumed robots, since they are villagers of Saint Mystere, though it is never confirmed specifically for them in-game. Percy, Marco, Agnes, Crouton, Nick, Rodney, Gerard, Jarvis, Andrea, Grum, Sylvain and Martha. However, with all of this, there still remain 3 characters for which things are a bit less clear: Claudia, Stetschinskarven and Granny Riddleton. Claudia is the family cat of the Reinholds, and was already in their possession while Lady Violet was still alive. By the game's defense, he is passed on to Lady Dahlia. It is not clear if Claudia is supposed to be a robot or not, as Bruno is only ever shown to make human robots, though it can be presumed that he would be capable of creating animal-based robots as well. A cat similar to Claudia also appears in the movie Eternal Diva, but this cannot be the same cat. The movie takes place between 2 to 3 years before Curious Village, while Claudia was already in the possession of the Reinhold family when Lady Violet was alive. Violet died while Flora was still very young, while she is considered to be an adult by Curious Village. While Flora's exact age is unknown, it can be surmised she is at least in the middle of her teenage years, placing Violet's death at least a decade before Curious Village. Aside from this, Claudia is also shown to eat, but so are confirmed robots. All in all, it is thus hard to say whether or not Claudia is a robot or not. Perhaps she was adopted by the Reinholds at some point, or perhaps he was one of the first robots to be built by Bruno after Matthew. It could also be that there was a real Claudia at some point, but that he was replaced by a robot, like with Lady Dahlia. Second character, Stetschinskarven, is a mysterious man who, in addition to appearing in Curious Village, also appears in 3 games set after it: Diabolical Box, Unbound Future and Millionaire's Conspiracy. In the credits of Curious Village, he is shown leaving Saint Mystere, setting up his appearances in these later games. He also appears briefly in Eternal Diva. All of this indicates he is likely not from Saint Mystere, and is merely visiting, like Pavel, and as such points to him not being a robot. Millionaire's Conspiracy He's also shown to have grown older, further indicating that he is not a robot, as they are said to be unable to grow. Granny Riddleton falls in a similar boat, but things are a bit more complicated in her case. She has her first meeting with Layton and Luke in Curious Village, and she goes on to reappear in Diabolical Box and Unknown Future. She also appears in the games and movies set before Curious Village, though here she mainly communicates with Amy Altava, who leaves Layton's side before Curious Village. She does interact with Layton and Luke directly in Miracle Mask, though under the guise of the Masked Elizabeth, keeping her first meeting in the original game intact through what I have to admit are some contrivances. She also appears in Millionaire's Conspiracy. Like Stetson Scarven, she has aged. This would all imply she is a human, but in profiles of Curious Village, she is implied to be a robot, specifically proof of Bruno's bizarre sense of humor. So, what is going on here? Personally, I think there are supposed to be two Granny Riddletons in the series. One is a robot built by Bruno that appears in Curious Village, the other is a human who appears in the rest of the series. Due to Granny Riddleton's appearances before Curious Village, it seems infeasible that she's a robot, as it seems doubtful Bruno would let the robots leave the village before their task was completed, especially as Granny Riddleton has the important task to keep track of puzzles visitors to the village might have missed. It is also noteworthy that in Diabolical Box, which would be Layton and Luke's first proper meeting with the human Granny Riddleton going by this theory, she does not recognize the two of them. This despite Layton and Luke recognizing her from their adventure in Saint Mystère, implying they did not meet in the recent past. This explanation allows for the Granny Riddleton in Curious Village to be a robot, while the other games imply Riddleton is a human. Perhaps Bruno even based his robot on the real Granny Riddleton. And that covers all the characters who appear in Curious Village. Most are robots, though a select few are not. For one, the cat Claudia, it is pretty unclear what he is supposed to be. I hope you enjoyed this overview of the robots created by Bruno for the Reinholds family, and hope to see you around. Goodbye!